Seja muito bem-vindo ao podcast Acendendo as Luzes, uma iniciativa do IFL-SP. O Instituto de Formação de Líderes de São Paulo é uma associação sem fins lucrativos, independente e apartidária, ou seja, nos guiamos por princípios e não por partidos. O Instituto tem o objetivo de formar com excelência líderes protagonistas, guiados pelos valores de vida, liberdade e propriedade. Se você quer se tornar um líder de excelência que defende valores de liberdade, tem entre 19 e 35 anos e mora em São Paulo, siga nosso Instagram, @IFLSP, para ficar por dentro dos nossos conteúdos e também do nosso processo seletivo. Mas não podemos ficar só no virtual. Está chegando o nosso maior evento presencial do ano, o Fórum Caminhos da Liberdade, que vai acontecer no dia 11 de outubro no Teatro B32 em São Paulo. Este ano, o tema do fórum será Quem Construiu o Brasil. São apenas 500 lugares. Para você não perder os primeiros ingressos, se inscreva no site forumsp.org e garanta o seu lugar.
Okay, Larry, hello. It is a pleasure to have you here in our podcast of IFL São Paulo. I am here with Pamela, and we are very honored to have the opportunity to interview you. Our podcast is highly focused on leadership topics, and I'm sure that our Brazilian audience is eager to know more about you as a person and also as a leadership in the libertarian movement on an international level. So, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Pedro and Pamela. I'm honored to be your guest.
Thank you. Well, before going into our conversation, I'll first like to introduce Larry. So, Larry is an economist. He's also a historian, and he's the president emeritus of Foundation for Economic Education in Atlanta, Georgia. Before retiring to the emeritus role in 2029, he served as president of FEE for 11 years. And prior to that, he was the founding president of the Mackinac Center for Public Policy in Midland, Michigan, for 21 years, and an economics professor at Northwood University for 7 years. Also, in 2023, the president of Poland bestowed upon Reed the Grand Cross of the Order of Merit of the Republic of Poland, the highest honor that Poland gives to a foreigner. President Ronald Reagan was a past recipient of that. And also, not least important, we have Pamela, my co-host. She is a researcher at INSPER, AgroGlobal, and a PhD student in economics at INSPER. She was an intern at Itaú Asset Management and also an intern in macroeconomic research at Credit Suisse, as well as a researcher in microeconomics at FIP-USP, the University of São Paulo. Thank you for being here, Pamela.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you a lot, Larry.
My pleasure.
Great. So, Larry, first of all, for our audience to get to know you, and we being defenders of classic liberalism, we wanted to know from you, how did you evolve as a leadership in this movement? What was the major features that you accomplished throughout your career to reach the level that you are right now? If you could summarize that.
Okay. Thank you, Pedro. Oddly enough, I never saw myself early in life as a leader. I did not aspire to leadership. I wanted to be a writer and a speaker, promoting ideas of liberty and free markets. But over time, I found myself over and over again running something. And I have to say, I have enjoyed every minute of that. But that started not so much by design as it was by nature without my really realizing it. When I was teaching at Northwood University in my 20s, I thought I had fulfilled my dream. I was teaching students by the hundreds every semester. I was free to advance ideas of liberty, but I was not content to simply do that. I found myself always wanting to start things and to run them, such as a summer week-long program we called a Freedom Seminar. And then I found myself wanting to create a major in economics because Northwood University did not have a major. You could not graduate with a bachelor's degree in economics. The university said, okay, well, you put it together. Tell us what it should look like. So I designed the major with the courses, and the administration approved it and said that since you were the instigator of this, we're going to put you in charge of it. And so for the first time, we had a Department of Economics, and I was elected chairman of it. And my principal duty in my last years of teaching was to implement the new economics major. And so I guess I fell into those leadership roles. But shortly after that, I went into the think tank business because I thought it would give me more freedom to travel and to do some interesting freelance journalism in tough places around the world, such as in countries behind the old Soviet Iron Curtain. And so I had offers to run think tanks in various places. One was in Idaho. I accepted that one and served as its president from 1984 to 1987. And then a new think tank that was just starting in Michigan, the Mackinac Center. The man who would soon become governor of Michigan was a key figure in that. He contacted me and said, why don't you move back to Michigan and be the president of this think tank? So I did, and I did that for 21 years, and then was called to run FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education. So I guess I'm one of those people who sort of fell into leadership positions, not because I, intended to do that, but because it seemed like the best thing to do to satisfy my other desires, which was to be influential in advancing ideas of liberty in free markets.
Amazing to hear. And it is interesting because we see this pattern. Many people saying that they didn't plan to become a leadership, but they eventually went into this path. And it makes me curious to know how you managed to do this transition. Because at first you were just an academic, a professor. So I assume that you didn't have a lot of managerial duties on your daily life. And suddenly you need to run an organization. So how did you feel about it? And how did you manage to tackle this new challenge that you have in front of you?
Well, you're right. My career started in academia, but I was not happy with standard or normal academia. I was one of those professors who wanted to start additional things and to run them, like the seminar program that I mentioned or the Department of Economics. And I was increasingly critical of, and more privately than publicly, but increasingly critical of what I saw as a common characteristic of academicians, which is that they tend to be good advocates when they're good teachers, but not very good at running anything or managing anything. And so I didn't study management, but I sort of learned by doing and by observing others. So when I started running the week-long Freedom Seminar, I had to learn from the ground up. How do you do that? How do you get people to come? So I had to develop some marketing talents as well, so get the word out, to get people to come from all over the country. So over the years, in various positions, I think I've grown in managerial skills, but that's from a combination of sources. I did do some reading among some of the great works of managerial theory as well as application. People like Peter Drucker, but also I observed people that I thought were good managers, and I tried to hire good managers. Some of the best employees I ever hired at the Mackinac Center in Michigan did not come from academia. They came from business management. One of them was an electrical engineer, Joe Overton, who became my senior vice president. He had a lot of managerial skill, and I learned a lot from him. So I think any good manager, any good leader has to always be a good listener, be willing to learn from others, recognize that you're not necessarily the best in your line of work, that there are other people who have a lot to teach you. And so I learned an immense amount over the years by being a manager, making some mistakes along the way, but then learning from them and trying to do better the next time.
Great. And what you just told us about this evolution reminded me of when I was an Internet Foundation for Economic Education for people who don't know me. And I asked you 8 years ago, okay, Larry, so what should I study to evolve? And you kindly told me, okay, you read about emotional intelligence and you sent me a couple books. So I was wondering, was emotional intelligence a crucial skill for you to develop yourself as a leadership? Do you have any other one, as such as being a good listener to achieve what you achieved?
Yeah, I think emotional intelligence is critically important to being a good leader. And I didn't realize for quite a while that I actually have a little bit of it. And through experience and reading, I think I've gathered a bit more of it. But as far back as I can remember, I think I've been a good listener. That's part of emotional intelligence. You've got to be able to read people. And to read them, you have to listen to them. But yeah, I think if you find somebody who wants to be a leader but doesn't seem tuned in to his surroundings, sort of self-absorbed, who doesn't take the cues that come from others by their facial expressions, by their words, by their behavior, I don't think you're going to be a good leader. Emotional intelligence, I think, is critically important. One of the people who had it by the boatloads and whom I met several times was President Ronald Reagan. Anybody who came to know him, I think, sooner or later, when asked about him and what he was like, would talk about traits of emotional intelligence that he possessed enormously. The moment you met him, he made you feel at home. He made you feel as though whatever you had to say, he was going to listen, that you were an important person. He wasn't looking at his watch while you were speaking, you know. And those and many other things are signs of emotional intelligence. And that was one of the keys, I think, to Reagan's leadership abilities. And I think without it, you're going to have a very tough time succeeding as a leader.
Pedro, may I ask a question?
Of course, feel free to do it.
Larry, it's really interesting when you talk about the leadership, especially when we think about your background, your academic background, because I have the same background, but I always had a one feet in academia and another feet in the financial markets and in the public policy. And one thing that I'd like to ask you is how to make these, especially these think tanks, more effective in shaping public policy, because usually these think tanks, they are made by academics, and I don't know if this is a behavioral trait that academia tends to bring more shy, I don't know if the perfect word, but a shy, more introspective people. But when we are thinking about translating our knowledge to shaping public policy, we must translate our idea to a broad public. So how can we better improve this, the power of these think tanks in shaping the public policy? Think that most of the think tanks, they are made by academic people.
Oh, a great question, Pamela. This is something I had to learn to fix, you might say, as president of the Mackinac Center, because we had a board of scholars. These were academics from around the state of Michigan who often authored commentaries and full-blown studies for the center. And then I worked with them when it came time to release their reports or their studies to the public. And I found that it was a constant struggle to emphasize with them the importance of marketing their work.
Yeah.
I think it's natural for academics to feel as though the job is done when they finish their research and have written up their paper. Here's the paper, see you later. And I had to stress to them over and over again, no, your work has barely begun. Before we even release your work to the public, we're going to run you through the mill so that you're ready to do that. So, for instance, I would ask the author of a study that we were soon to release, I would ask him, as if I were a skeptical reporter, I would say, how do your findings or your recommendations help people? And you'd be surprised at how many of them were kind of stunned by that. What? I never thought of that. But what's the purpose of doing the report if they don't end up somehow helping people? So I use that as an example to point out that you have to get academicians who may be the best researchers and writers around, but you have to get them in a marketing mindset so that they understand their audience, so they now know how to express a difficult concept in terms that ordinary people can understand. Yeah. And until they're able to answer that question, how does your study help people, in a coherent and effective fashion, they were not ready for prime time. So that was part of it. But also, I always recognized, more so with the passage of time, that few academics really will ever develop the skill of a really good marketer. They need assistance. Their work is not focused in marketing so much, just by nature of what they do. Great researchers, great writers, but marketing is a very different talent. So I had to work with them to draw that out and to improve that considerably. And that even involved, how to behave in front of a camera.
Mm-hmm.
Because academics sometimes, as you mentioned, they can be shy. They kind of look down instead of looking at their audience straight in the eye. Sometimes they talk forever instead, like I'm doing right now.
Yes, this is my first podcast that I'm academics. I'm trying to travel.
No, you're doing a great job. I mean, you smile. Sometimes you have to teach academics to smile because, they've been in the books too long. They haven't tried to relate to the people that they hope to talk to. So, people come as a bundle of different characteristics, and sometimes you have to graft on a few new ones to get them to be effective.
Sometimes I think that's also the language is a barrier because we are in this world of ideas and we have technical terms that summarize a big idea. Yeah. When you want to talk to a broader audience, or even for not so broad, but another audience, you should adapt your language, the words that you're using. Otherwise, people won't understand you, right?
Yeah. And another exercise I put our academic friends into sort of addresses that. And that is, I try to get them to understand how they needed to condense what they wanted to say into sound bites, understandable, appealing sound bites. I remember with one in particular who had done a study for us on labor policy. I asked him, okay, can you summarize your recommendations in 30 seconds? And his initial response was, 30 seconds? No, it took me 60 pages. You got to give me at least a half hour or an hour. And I said, wait a minute, we don't have that kind of time when we go before a news conference. So he struggled. He could not express his recommendations in 30 seconds. So finally I said, his name was Bob. I said, Bob, you're the author. I'm not, but I read your study and I can condense it into 10 seconds. And basically you're arguing that it would be good for Michigan workers if they were free to decide on their own if they wanted to join a labor union or not, period. That's your major conclusion. I did it in 10 seconds. So that was always a problem because, they're talkers. They like to go on forever. And no offense, Pamela, you're going to be one of the more effective ones, I'm sure. But
yeah. Sometimes I think I'm an outlier here because I have a fit here in academia and other the business, and I try to manage all this. And sometimes I feel I don't belong to one and then don't belong to another. But it's just all on my devices.
We can say that you belong to both.
Yeah.
Bridge, right?
Yeah.
Also, people.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just about to say that the lawyers speak a lot as well. And I was in law school, and I had a professor who also was a judge, and he told me that if he received a document from a lawyer that was longer than 10 pages, he knew that the person that he was offending didn't have any rights. Because to have a right, it is so easy to be defended. So if it was longer than that, he wouldn't even read. So fun fact about some lawyers and judges in Brazil.
That's right. And, sometimes you do have a longer period of time to get your viewpoint out, but often you don't. And even when you have a half hour or an hour, you still need to be able to distill the main point or points of your work into a soundbite that people will take away, that they'll remember.
Yes. And while going back to Ronald Reagan, you mentioned him as being a role model of emotional intelligence, and I also know that you met him in person, and he also addressed you during a political campaign that you ran. So I wanted to know more about your relationship with Ronald Reagan, and also for you to mention how was this experience of running in a political campaign for Congress. Could you share to us about it, please?
Sure. Although I met him 3 times, it would not be accurate to say that I really knew him or he knew me much more than as a name or for the moment. The most involved interaction with him that I ever had was the 3rd meeting, and that was in 1987, when I had an invitation through Oliver North to lunch at the White House with President Reagan. It turned out it was 2 small tables of guests and the president, so I wasn't the only one. But just as I felt on the previous 2 briefer occasions, I felt that he had the ability to connect with people right from the start, that he just oozed a genuineness. What you saw was what you got. I never felt for a moment that I was, being deceived or that he had an ulterior motive, that he was telling me anything but the truth as he saw it. And others have remarked about that Reagan really was as genuine as he came across in his communications. He also had a very good managerial talent of finding good people. A few exceptions. I mean, you can't hire hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people over 8 years and not make a few mistakes. But generally, he found good people. And then as long as they did a good job, he empowered them and encouraged them. He didn't try to micromanage them. And in that regard, he stood in stark contrast to his predecessor, Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter famously micromanaged the White House right to the point where if you were an executive branch employee and you wanted to, even a White House employee, and you wanted to use the White House tennis courts, you had to go through the president. I mean, and Reagan would never do that. He would say, "What? I got more important things than who plays on the tennis courts to worry about." But Jimmy Carter was a micromanager, and I think good employees don't want to be micromanaged. They want to feel as though they are empowered to perform and do their work. And that's the way Reagan behaved as a manager. So he was a much more successful president, in part because of that. And then you had a second part to your question, Pedro. I've forgotten what it was.
No worries. And before addressing the second part of my question, because it is regarding your political campaign that you ran. I just wanted to tell our audience that the reason I'm asking this is because I saw a letter in your house written from Reagan to you. So this is also a fun fact. Like, we are here interviewing someone who had like direct interaction with a former president of the United States. So I wanted to know, like, how was the challenge, that you had during this political campaign? And most importantly, what was any flaw that you face, as someone who was on a campaign, maybe some mistake that you committed, like that you could share with us that you learned from?
Reagan, by the way, was a reader of fee materials. In fact, I have a copy in my house downstairs of a famous photograph that he sent as president to Leonard Read, our founder. He's on Air Force One in a window seat, and Nancy, his wife, is leaning against him. She looks sound asleep, and he's reading the Freeman, which was our flagship publication at Fee. And he sent that to our founder, Leonard Read, back in 1981 or 2. Well,
Amazing.
yeah, well, I was still a professor at Northwood University. I decided in 1982 that I wanted to run for Congress. I have to say, looking back, that, I had a kind of impetuous, youthful attribute where I felt like I always wanted to be doing something new, something challenging, running something else. And I had decided, I think maybe a year or two before, that I would run for Congress, but I would wait until 84. And meantime, I would just go around the district giving speeches, getting better known. But then when the state senator who was going to be a candidate for Congress at 82 against the Democratic incumbent, at the last minute dropped out, then some politicians who had kind of noticed that I was getting better known, including a former governor of Michigan. At that time, he hadn't been elected governor yet, but he came to me and said, why don't you run this time in 82? And I'm sure they kind of thought, well, this is going to be a tough year. It's midterm in the Reagan first term. Unemployment is high. The incumbent party never does well in the midterms. Maybe they thought of me as a sacrificial lamb. But I thought, yeah, I'll give it a try. So I won the Republican nomination for Congress, ran against a Democrat incumbent. And although I enjoyed every minute of it, I also I have no regrets for either running or for losing. But looking back on it, I think I decided, I'm glad I did this, but I don't think it's really cut out for me. And the main reason was I just thought there was so much about politics that was so superficial. I'd come from academia where I could explore ideas and in depth with students. And now I was giving speeches that were just generalities because you never have much more time than that. And that's what people expect. And that's what all the advisors tell you. Don't provide too many details or you'll just get yourself in trouble. And I just thought so many times when I give a speech to a crowd and, you get applause, and I would think to myself, well, don't applaud me just because, I've got an R next to my name. I'm of the same party. Why don't you ask me some really tough, good, deep questions? But they rarely came. So I just thought the whole business was for somebody else. It was a little too superficial for me.
Well, I think this is really like a really important self-awareness skill, because you need to, in Brazil, we have this expression, you need to know what are the wars that you're going to pick. So you have the academic war, the political war, the business war. So you know, like, okay, this is not my field. I'm gonna get a step back, and there will be someone better trained than me. And I do this. Mm-hmm.
I would encourage everybody to have the courage to try new and different things from time to time. You'll learn things about yourself. You'll make new friends. Even though I lost that run for Congress, boy, it opened so many doors for me. I made so many new friends that I still have 40 years later. So I have no regrets about losing it or giving it a try.
Great. Pamela, would you like to ask something, or can I continue?
Yeah, we can go because it's really interesting on the role of leadership.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, talking more about IFL, Lawrence, we are an institute focused on developing business leaders under the principles of classic liberalism. And we are based in São Paulo, and in this year we will face elections, and we have some classic liberal candidates, but still we lack a major representation. And I wanted to know from you, what should this type of institutes do in order to nurture the seeds for a new generation of politicians, of business leaders to stand out in a very important state such as São Paulo, and to be a role model, as I can say, for other states, other Brazilian states, because this is really crucial for us, to never let the flame of liberty to, diminish.
Yeah.
So is there something that you think, okay, you guys really need to do this? Like from my past experiences, something that you really need to focus on as a development institute focused on development.
Yes. Actually, the second thing I'll mention that will address your question more in detail. But of course, the first thing is remain faithful to your principles, because they should be the whole reason why you do anything, whatever it is that you do. So there's an educational role that institutes can play and should play to get people inspired about classical liberal ideas, so that if they do decide to go into business or government or media or whatever, that they have that as a primary motivation to be an effective advocate for sound ideas. But the second point is in some ways more important, at least in terms of being ultimately successful, and that is to teach and develop communication skills. A lot of folks who believe as we do in freedom and free markets, they act as though that's all that's necessary. Just understand freedom and free markets and, good things will happen. They neglect sometimes the important role of developing the kind of persona or personality and personality traits that can translate these ideas into winnable propositions. It will attract converts. It will bring people to our side. And so that's why I often stress to people, aside from just reading the classics and all the good stuff out there on freedom and free markets, you need to invest in your personal abilities to communicate. There's a classic work in America. I don't know how well it's known in Brazil, but it has sold tens of millions of copies in the U.S. anyway, by Dale Carnegie, called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Great book. You will learn in that little book things like how to improve your memory, how to, although I don't think Carnegie used the phrase emotional intelligence, many of the tips he offers really are tips that will improve your emotional intelligence. And there's a more recent book by Olivia Cabani, Cabane. That might be one I think I sent to you, Pedro, because I've been really a big advocate for it in recent years. It's called The Charisma Myth. The Charisma Myth.
I love this book. It's just really good, and you sent it to me.
Yeah, okay, I thought I did. Yeah, a gem on every page. And the myth that she is addressing is the idea that, charisma is something you're either born with it or not. Nothing you can do to develop it. And she says, no, that's not true. There are ways to develop yourself into a charismatic personality. And that a lot of her advice is really along the lines of emotional intelligence. So I guess I would say anything you can do to teach good communication skills, verbally as well as in print, how to rebut arguments from the opposing side in ways that will convince people, how to deliver sound bites that are captivating. Anything along the lines of more effective communication, I think, will perform a very valuable service.
Well, I will make sure that we put the Charisma Myth in our list of books for IFL SP São Paulo.
Okay.
Larry, one of our main takeaways from this conversation, from many takeaways that we had, is the importance of the communication skills, because you can have a good idea, but if you don't talk, if you don't convince people, they are not going to get what you think, and this idea won't spread into society. But also we need an organization for this. And going to a more practical side of the conversation, you brought FEE to a leading position in the North American think tanks. My question is, what were your major challenges at FEE? Fundraising, operations, marketing? Specifically thinking about the think tank, what were your main challenges in bringing this to this leading position?
The challenges I faced changed over time. Pablo, the very first of the many challenges when I became president in 2008 was to, you might say, right the ship. keep it from sinking, because it was a difficult time. We had a huge deficit in our operations. And so I had to not only find new sources of funding at a time when the Great Recession was just getting underway, but also had to make decisions to reduce staff and cut costs. Sometimes a leader is reluctant to do those things, but if you keep the big picture in mind, I mean, you've always got to be fair to people and try to keep the best. But there are times when to keep an organization or a business afloat, you have to make very tough decisions. You have to explain to some people that, I'm sorry, there's not a good fit here for you anymore, and I'll help you find something else, but I can't use you here now. Also, I had to focus on developing a strategic plan because we hadn't done that at FEE for as long as anybody could remember. And that meant making tough decisions like who would be our audience. FEE used to just talk to anybody who would listen, but that didn't make sense anymore. And we decided, let's focus on a particular demographic. And we ended up deciding on newcomers to Liberty of high school and college age. Well, once you decide on such a targeted demographic, well, then it changes everything you do and how you do it and how you express your ideas. So that was a challenge to get staff on the right page, moving in that direction, and to find new staff who could carry that out. There's always a challenge, of course, when you are in the business of hiring people, of dealing with mistakes that you've made. And so I've not only hired a lot of people over time, I've had to fire a few. And I think in hindsight, I've learned a lot about that. That's firing someone can be less of a challenge than you might think if you've done the right things ahead of time. For instance, unless someone does some kind of behavior that is just, off the wall, out of the blue, immediately a fireable offense. If it's simply, that they're not up to snuff, well, then don't make a job performance review a kind of gotcha session. Instead, work with them privately, confidentially, express your misgivings. Don't wait until the annual review to spring on them, all kinds of surprise objections. Raise them privately as they occur and work with them. Develop a plan so that these concerns can be dealt with and put behind us over time. So that's important. I've tried to make every employee always feel as though I gave them the benefit of the doubt on everything until they gave me reason not to. I try to be a good cheerleader. I think that's important for a leader, to be a cheerleader. Get the best you can find, empower them to do their job, and when they do it well, be quick to praise them. Criticize only in private, praise in public. Make them feel wanted, valuable, and rewarded when they do the right thing and perform well. Fundraising was always a challenge too. But looking back, I guess
it is a challenge for us as well.
Yeah. It always is. But if you've got a plan that you can sell, and you've developed a sales pitch or talk that is compelling, if you can go in front of a donor and not in 3.5 hours, but rather, in the first 5 or 10 minutes, make a compelling case why what you're doing is worthy of their support, then you can be successful. But there always will be setbacks. But I also have to say, I think I've been lucky in that regard too. I mean, there have been so many moments when, I'll give you an example. When I first took over FEE and I told you we had that huge deficit, a man I never even met passed away and left us $1.2 million. And then on another occasion, when funds were a bit of a challenge, I got a call on the Saturday from our executive director saying, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm walking my dog in the woods." And he said, a man just bequeathed us $1 million in Bitcoin donations. And, there were moments like that where I think, golly, I must be lucky. But, luck doesn't always happen unless I think you have to earn your luck.
That's what I was about to say. Every leader says, oh, you got to be prepared to be lucky. Like when the lucky comes, you're prepared to take advantage of it.
Yeah. But if we hadn't done a good and obviously deserving job up to that point, those lucky moments wouldn't have happened. So maybe it wasn't luck at all, but the timing sure seemed to be.
Amazing, Larry. Going deeper into this aspect of like a managerial challenge that you faced at FI, I wanted to address the challenge of scale, because eventually FI needed to go through digital transformation, of course, since it is such an old institute, 70 years old, it needed to face the challenges of the 21st century. So how did you and your managers address this challenge to transition and to become also a leader, like to be in a leading position in its website, in its editorial that I know it receives many monthly views, like hundreds of thousands?
Yeah.
How was it? Did you hire someone, or was something more of a team challenge, or there was someone who was key into doing this digital transformation?
Well, I'm one of those leaders that tries to recognize how little he knows and how important it is to find people who know what you don't. This is one area. The first time I ever used PowerPoint to give a lecture was just this past February. I mean, that's how tech challenged I am. But I always try to be aware of what's going on in that world and others that I'm not familiar with, and make a good judgment as to, is that a path we should go down? And then if I decide that it is, then I go out and try to find the right people. I used to say when I was at the Mackinac Center that I had no fear of ever hiring somebody who was better than me in anything or even everything. And as an example, I used to say, if I thought I could get Milton Friedman to join the Mackinac Center staff, but I'd have to pay him 5 times, 10 times what I'm being paid, would I still do it? Of course I would. Think of the advantage of having somebody of that stature on your staff. So if you got a team attitude instead of, the show is all me, then of course you would find the best, hire the best, reward them, thank them, and grow as a team. So that's what I did when it came to technology. I made some inquiries, and then we started hiring the right people, and the rest is history. So I could have hung on and said, no, I'll figure this out myself, but what a waste of time that would be. That's not where my talent is. So I go out and shake the bushes and find donors to support the good work that other good people I've found will do. And that includes the digital world.
Great. Well, now going to a different direction, I know Pamela will be curious about this as well, is how is your relationship to Poland? Because you received the highest honor a foreigner can receive. So I wanted to know more about that. Did you do something specific, or was it some relationship that you developed over time? How was that?
Just a parenthesis, Pedro. Larry, I lived in Hungary, and a great friend of mine, she's Polish, and living there, I know how those people love liberty.
Yes.
They hate a big state because they know what is to lose their liberty to some bureaucrats to tell them what they gonna wear, where they gonna work, and so on. So it's really interesting living in Brazil and seeing people defending those ideas and living there, where people that live those conditions say like, you should think twice because it's not good to lose your liberty.
Yeah. Oh, the Polish people are such fantastic people. Well, you remember, both of you, that I at least casually mentioned that I've always had an impetuous side, I guess. The side of me that wants to strike out, do something new, do something different, maybe take a risk. I was a hardcore communist growing up as a teenager and into my 20s. I just saw the Soviet Union and its efforts around the world as nothing short of evil, as President Reagan put it, the evil empire. And mainly because I kept thinking about ordinary life in those places, how difficult it must be for people to endure these tyrants who tell them they can't leave, they can't do this, they can't do that, but, imposing all this socialist garbage on them. I wanted to do something about that. So when I was running a think tank in Idaho, this is after my teaching career and before I went to run the one in Michigan, I decided, hey, I'm going to use my spare time as a freelance journalist to go make contact in countries behind the Iron Curtain where there are active people resisting communist oppression. I look back on that now and I think, gee, I'm not so sure I could at age 70 do what I decided to do at age 25 or 30. I'm not sure I could take those risks. But there's something about, youth where you are willing to behave in more risky behavior. But
it is the same with me, Larry. When I was a teenager, I used to, jump out of rocks to the sea in my home state. And now I think back, how crazy was I? I would never do that again. So
yeah. With time, you look back.
Logical.
Yeah, we change with age, no question. Well, I was giving some speeches on Central America because I had made travels there and had interviewed some key people, including the future president of Nicaragua. I was giving these speeches in Idaho, where I was living at the time, 84, 85, 86. And after one of them, a young Pole came up to me. He had been expelled from his own country by his own government. He came up afterwards, all excited. He said, Mr. Reed, you must do in Poland what you've been doing in Central America, Nicaragua in particular, connecting with anti-communist resistance elements. And he said, I can set it up for you in Poland. And I said, okay, what do we do? And so he set it up so that I could get into Poland. And from the moment I was there until I left, this is November of 86, I was meeting with people who were actively and illegally resisting communist tyranny. They were underground printers, professors who had their own underground classes, and even underground universities and with their own commencement exercises, underground book distributors and insurance companies. I mean, you name it. I saw a side to Polish society that I found absolutely remarkable. Here is a communist country, and yet people are carving out their existences in brazen defiance of the regime in Warsaw, under the threat of possible Soviet invasion, no less. But they were for liberty and never going to do anything on its behalf. So I was blown away by my time there. But something I did or said somewhere along the way got me in trouble, because when I went to leave the country, the government was waiting for me. And at the airport in Warsaw, when I got to the passport booth, the official looked at my passport, got on the telephone, and there comes three guys in guns and uniforms. And that commenced about a 3-hour interrogation, a strip search, and the whole works. And I was expelled from Poland and not allowed to come back until the communists were thrown out 2.5 years later. Now, in the years since, I've gone back to Poland many times. I've written about Polish history and the great stories of Polish courage. But when the president of Poland surprised me with this recent award, he cited mostly what I did in 1986, because I not only told the story in media in the West about the Polish underground, I helped raise money for the publication in Poland illegally of great works of freedom from the West. And you have seen, Pedro, because you've been here to my house, one of my prized mementos is a copy of Milton Friedman's Free to Choose that I raised the money for, that was translated and printed illegally and distributed in communist Poland by the underground. And so it was for that activity primarily that the Polish president gave me that award, which came out of the blue. I was just stunned and by it.
Well, if I feel touched by it, I imagine like how you felt when you received this honor, because when we read about the stories of Cold War, like we have a glimpse of what happened, but you actually felt what was like that. And I feel that I had a similar feeling now that I went to Cuba and I saw how the lack of liberty, the lack of freedom diminishes the ability for people to become leaders.
Yeah.
You don't see anyone standing out. They have no perspective of a better future. So they're just there randomly surviving, not even living, just waiting if one day something will happen and their lives will change, but without that much hope.
Yeah, and it was just remarkable to, even though I've been back to Poland many times, still, when I went to receive the award in November of 23, I saw many Polish friends I had not seen in 37 years who were part of that underground activity that I saw way back then. And to see them again in a free Poland was quite a wonderful moment.
Pedro, we talked about, I talked to Pedro days before when he went to Cuba. And one thing that we talk about is how people, although they are happy with life, it's a kind of, they lose hope on growing or in having their individuality, because there's a kind, and I felt this also in Budapest, maybe a reminiscence of the communist period, is that a kind of a dark air there, because it kind of in the collective consensus that there's someone above you that's putting the eyes on, like Big Brother is watching you.
Yes.
Well, you have to keep you're in that small square, because otherwise there will appear someone and take your stuff or question you a lot. Actually, there is a term in psychology that from Dr. Marty Seligman called learned helplessness, when you lose your hope that you can grow beside that situation, because that state, the big state, is so present that you stop trying, because sometimes you feel that, oh, maybe the government or a Polish someone will go here and do something to me. So they keep in that small corner. I felt this in Budapest, and Pedro told me that this happened a little in Cuba.
Yeah, and you can't help but feel, your heart goes out to people who can't grow and be themselves, who don't have that hope that every human being should have. At the same time, another feeling is prompted in my heart and my gut, and that is an anger against the tyrants who are imposing this on people. I just want to stand up and say, how dare you? How dare you deny anybody the right to speak their mind, to go as far as their talents can take them? This is a basic human right, and you have no business using the power of government to come in and squash dissent or to tell people they can't be all that they want to be. I just think one of the greatest joys of my life is even in small ways, giving tyrants a hard time.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. It's a feeling that, how do you feel entitled to tell the population how they should behave or feel? Like, do you think you are more intelligent or can feel better than the own population?
Yeah. Yeah, they may think that, but of course it's a fiction in their own minds. And sometimes it's not enough just to tell these people what they're all about. Sometimes in some places you have to get rid of them. And that's why when you see a pro-freedom revolution in a tyrannical country, I cheer it on. Nobody wants bloodshed, but nonetheless, sometimes you have to fight for your freedom.
The funny thing is that you only know the value of freedom when you lose that. And this is why it's important to talk with people from Hungary, from Poland, that will tell you, no, listen, it's important your individuality and freedom to choose, right?
I couldn't say it any better.
Well, Larry, thank you. We are going to the final minutes of our conversation, and I wanted to ask you three things. You tell me if you ask me if you needed me to repeat, okay?
Okay.
So the first one is a message to people who want to be leaders in moments of oppression. So this can be very hypothetical. I'm not talking about one specific moment of oppression, but let's say someone who is facing a lack of free speech in his country. The second one is a suggestion of book that you read and that you like it. That doesn't need to be a business one. It can be any book.
Okay.
And the third one, it is a country that someone should travel to just for tourism.
Okay.
And I'm asking this because I know that you visit more than 80 countries.
Yeah.
So end this conversation with a good tone.
Okay. Well,
by the way, we are not able. I think we are not being able to see you. So I think maybe you turn off your camera.
Oh, but you can hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you, definitely.
Okay. Well, I did notice that it went just to a picture of me. I didn't touch anything. I'm not sure why, but if it's all right, I'll just continue anyway since we're near the end.
Okay, right.
Okay. Sorry about that. Wait a minute.
Worry. I
see. Okay. Oh, there. Okay.
Now we have you again.
I didn't turn it off, but maybe some dictator somewhere hacked us.
Yes.
Well, the first question, I would say, Pedro, my answer would be the same whether the person is living in a very oppressed country or not. And that is that you should never underestimate the importance of personal character. If you want to be an influential person, whatever your environment may be, you've got to be perceived by other people as the real thing, because you are. You have to say what you mean and mean what you say. You can't live one life when you're talking to some people and a different life when you're talking to other people. And if you maintain the highest standards of personal character, and that spans the range from honesty to humility to patience to courage to responsibility, gratitude, all those superlative character traits, if you practice the highest standards of those traits, you'll be amazed at the influence you can have, the doors that will open for you, the numbers of people who will beat a path to your door to hear what you have to say. They'll not do that if they think, oh, this guy really doesn't mean it, this guy's not honest, or this gal isn't really serious, or that, you've got to be the real thing right from the get-go. And that's what hit me very hard with the Polish resistance. Wow, these people really meant it. They lived it. They didn't just say it. They were actually living it, their desire for freedom. The second question, remember the third, but I forgot the second.
Book, a suggestion of a book suggestion.
Oh, yeah.
Literature or business one?
Okay. I'm a believer in reading great biographies of great men and women. And certainly one of the best I've ever read is by Eric Metaxas, spelled Metaxas. It's called Amazing Grace, and it's a biography of William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce was the member of the British Parliament who led the effort in the Parliament to first abolish the slave trade and then abolish slavery itself. And of course, he succeeded at that. But the biography points out there were a lot of low moments along the way. So that's a great book for aspiring leaders, because Wilberforce proved every bit the leader that movement needed in order to succeed. And it'll leave a tear in your eye when you're done. And the third thing is a country that people should visit.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I can't think of a one that I don't think people should visit. I think they ought to go to all of them if they can. I'll never make that, but I'm trying. But I would say, the history of Great Britain is so rich in hallmarks for liberty. So rich, in fact, I find myself drawn to British history, both as a visitor to Britain now probably 15 or more times, and also as an author. That long history of winning the battle for individual liberty, still being fought today, it's not over by any means, but
against the Labour Party.
Yeah, I know. There are going to be some big battles that'll need to be fought in the next few years for that reason alone. But you look back at Britain, which at one time was governed by an absolute monarchy that didn't tolerate any dissent. And along the way, you have the Magna Carta. You have the Glorious Revolution of 1689. You have the Prime Minister Gladstone in the 19th century, Prime Minister 4 times, and who did more than perhaps anybody else in British history, or the British government anyway, to advance human liberty. It's just an amazing story. And over the years, I've taken students to Britain and conducted history tours. I can't remember. Did you go on one of those, Pedro?
No, not to this one. Not to this
okay.
one.
Yeah, there's so much to see that remind you of all those important milestones along the way. We owe a great deal to people who loved liberty in Britain over the centuries and who fought for it and gave us so many of those remarkable milestones. So I'd say Britain, which is pretty average, right? Most people would say, oh, yeah, you got to go to London. But I would say Britain because of its history of liberty.
Amazing. And I don't think it is like the first country that people would think so, and not specifically for this reason. So this was a good one. Thank you, Larry. Pamela, would you like to say something?
I'd like only to say thank you, Larry, to have a moment to talk to us. We are here trying to spread these ideals, and your presence here for sure will help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Pedro. And one last word, never give up. Once you know what the right thing is, once you know how important liberty is, don't let any setback ever slow you down.
Thank you very much, Larry. It was an honor to have you. I say thank you in the name of the Instituto de Formação de Líderes de São Paulo. And I wanted to tell our audience that if you wish to be a leader, please be part of our application process. It happens twice a year. We have weekly meetings, really, really good, that will definitely impact your life. So see you next week. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Wow, great. Oh, okay, I think we're done for now.
Hey, thank you both. I think it went okay. I hope you think so too.
Yes, it was amazing. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, well, I hope you get good feedback. And if it goes online and you want me to help promote it on social media, I'll be happy to do that.
Yes, for sure. Thank you. I was about to ask you that. And also, I know one person, this guy, he's a journalist from Revista Oeste. It is a major newspaper in Brazil, the top one defender of liberty right now. And he told me that he wanted to talk to you. So if I could send your email to him, he wanted to have a conversation or something, maybe a podcast as well. Would you be open to that?
Oh, absolutely. Love to. I just got an email yesterday. Do you know Paulo Gadini? Ghedini?
Paulo Gadini? No, never heard of him.
I want to say Sao Paulo, but I guess I'm not. I just assumed that maybe. I don't think he actually said. Well, he is. I'll tell you what. I have your email address. Pedro, I don't have yours, Pamela, but you could share it with Pamela. I'll send you his. At least a portion of his written note where he's talking about a new initiative he's getting underway. He's translating some great free market stuff into Portuguese because he would be a good connection for you to make, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Please send it to me and we'll get in touch with him.
Oh,
I don't know if you know, Larry, but currently here in Brazil, we have a Supreme Court that's really activist on cutting our liberty. And by saying this, I mean, for example, previous, and how do you say censura in English, Pedro? They try to censor media outlets.
Right.
And Revista Oeste is one of those that are being the government's going against because they have this conservative view. So currently here in Brazil, it's not just on the level of ideas, the discussion, but we have a power on the Supreme Court that they are going against our individual liberties. It's a hard time, but
Yeah,
Hold
I
their
wanted
feet
to
to the fire.
I wanted to address that, but
we're afraid.
yeah, we are afraid. I did when I asked you, okay, a final message to people who want to be leader in a moment of oppression. I wanted to say specifically about us in Brazil, but I don't want to do that because maybe someone will hear me and put me in jail for that. There were people who were put in jail for less. There was one guy who was in a club in São Paulo, like doing a sauna, or maybe or he was in a restaurant, but it was a very personal space where he was, and he said, "Oh, this guy, he's a douchebag, like a justice in our Supreme Court," and he went to prison because of that.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
each
Anyway.
person has to find in himself, how much willingness he is to put everything on the line. And
Yeah.
sometimes, if you're in the midst of a battle, you could always jump, let's say like World War I, when you're fighting trench warfare. I suppose you could jump out of the trench and with a hand grenade in your hand and say to the enemy, "Here I am," and then lob a grenade at them. But then a second later, they shoot you.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's better to stay in the trench and find a better way to lob more grenades.
Mm-hmm.
Just and not take yourself out of the battle. So I wouldn't presume to know what you each should do individually.
Mm-hmm.
You got the spirit of liberty within you, and opportunities will arise, and you'll know when to take them.
I'm sure of that. Yeah, we are very optimistic. Well, thank you, Larry. Pamela and I'm sure you need to go as well, but we have in 40 minutes, we will have a meeting in person in another business center here.
Okay.
So thank you again. It was amazing.
My pleasure. Radio, my dog says hello to you both.
Okay. Say hello to him as well.
Okay. See ya.
Larry, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.